things like questioning skills, asking the right sorts of questions. Now, I know you've got a series of standard questions that you tend to ask, but there might be others. Come back to that. And really, really important, describing the benefits of the advice you're given effectively. And that's one of the things I think that you haven't been doing, or felt that you haven't been able to do in the last month so much with the scrappage scheme. Positivity and advocacy. And by advocacy I mean, encouraging people to go a bit further than perhaps they originally wanted to. And finally, giving people additional advice, surprising the customer with something extra and leaving a great impression. And all of those skills are about going further than meeting the customer's initial needs. And that might not be something that you've been expected to do in other contexts when you're when you're handling calls. What I would like to do is to go through with you each of the things in this customer engagement circle so that you can understand how they're related to one another. We start off with explaining the role of EST, which is something that you are required to do. And we prefer you to do it fairly early in the call. Partly because if you do it early in the call, then you don't forget to do it. And B, I think it sets up some expectations, or it clarifies things. So, can you tell me why you think we want you to explain the role of EST to everyone who calls?
So they realise who they're actually talking to, for starters.
Yes.
Because a lot of people are given this number from Warmfront, from the council.
Yes.
So, oh yeah, phone them up, they can help you.
Yeah.
And everyone thinks, by phoning us up, that we are going to arrange for the work to be carried out.
Yes.
We are going to send a surveyor. We are going to do the installation. A lot of them don't realise that we are actually not that we are only a government-funded free and impartial advice service.
Yes.
A lot of people don't actually quite get that.
Yes.
Also starts to build a rapport with them as well, if they know exactly who you are.
Yes.
Do you get the guest bill people? Take the number off the back of the guest bill.
Yes.
Automatically.
Yes.
We're British guests.
You inadvertently you bring their attention to something that perhaps they haven't thought about before. Energy saving.
Yes. That's right. So there's two sides to this why you do it. One is so they know who they're talking to. And that's really, really important, because often they'll have spoken to lots of different people and they think you've got money. But the other thing is to actually flag up what you do, so that, for instance, with the boiler scrappage scheme, they could quite possibly think that your role is just to facilitate the boiler scrappage scheme and nothing else, because that's the number they've called. So the way I tend to recommend that people explain the role of EST is using a phrase that incorporates about saving energy into it. So we offer free and impartial advice on saving energy, or saving energy in and around the home is a one some advisors use. The free and impartial bit is important, so they know that, or supported by government, that's fine too. But remember to add in the about saving energy, so that they know that in fact that you're a source of expertise and knowledge. Now, you may not feel like that at the moment. You may feel as though you haven't been here long enough, but I think you will have picked up quite a lot of knowledge and expertise along the way. So it's important that you flag that up. So you're not raising their expectations, but you're actually setting their expectations into some sort of framework. Oh, so they do this as well. They may not listen. They may not take it in when you're saying it, but that's fine, because a lot of them will. So explaining the role of EST is the first thing. Now, asking questions, because we started talking about that. What sort of questions do you think you could ask to help get a better idea of how you might advise them? I know you've got some standard questions you tend to ask. About the property, do you always ask those?
Yep.
Yeah.
And their personal circumstances as well.
Yeah.
Age, benefit situation, homeowner,
Yeah.
and stuff.
What property questions, do you always ask questions about what fuel they use,
Yep.
installation?
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else?
Whether they draft proofed.
Yeah. So all those property questions, are there any other questions that you could ask that might give you a better idea of what their needs might be?
You could basically ask that all in one, rather than asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask them about their property,
Yeah.
rather than just saying that, because then you could get more information from the customer,
Yes.
rather than just asking the standard set one questions. You say, well, what kind of property is it, and explain it to me, or tell me about that property in general.
Mm-hmm.
You might get more out of the customer rather than asking the one-on-one questions.
You might.
And also how they use energy in the home as well. If
How-
they're
yes.
if they're on their own,
Yes.
that usually leads into TVRs, usually, in the conversation.
Yes.
So, they can control the heating throughout their house, especially with older people. They just turn on the central heating.
Yes.
And if you advise them about the actual recommended temperature,
Yes.
you can go further into them actually using the equipment that's already been in place. Because warm front will put thermostatic radiator valves in, but not necessarily tell them how to use it properly.
Yes.
So
Okay.
it's just general advice like that around the home.
Yeah.
And most of the time when you do tell them that, they seem to react really positively to
Yeah.
positively to it.
Good. So the questions might be, how do you use energy? I mean, do you use a lot of? Do you have your heating on a lot? Do you use a lot of energy? Do you find your bills are high? Do you find your house is cold? Because for some people the issue will be comfort, and for some people the issue will be that they've got a lot of people in the house using a lot of energy. For some people it'll be money, bills are high. And those kinds of questions can help to tease out. If it's somebody that you think, well, you said that you pick up some cues, don't you, that people are interested in the environment, you can ask supplementary questions there. Now, I'm not suggesting you ask all of those questions in all calls, but if you ask a few questions about how people use energy, or how many people are in the home, or do they find their bills are high, or do they use their controls, that can help you to give additional advice.
One thing I've done, maybe it's wrong, I've remembered a couple of, like for example, when people ask about ground source heat pumps, I know I had a lovely chap one day telling me he'd had one put in, and he was so pleased because he had, he had it arranged so that an immersion heater would cut in if the water wasn't warm enough, and he said it hadn't cut in for 12 months. So his ground source heat pump had provided enough hot water and so I quote that to people sometimes, just to say, well, I had one of my callers said this, that and the other, just as a bit of reinforcement. I mean, obviously it's not scientific, but it's
can be helpful.
Just hopefully it's helpful.
And then there are really basic questions when people ring you up, and instead of just going straight into grant finding mode, ask them a few questions just to get to the bottom of what it is they're actually after. Because sometimes people do go straight into, you will say something like, I'm going to ask you a few questions to find out a bit more about your property, and if I may, I'll ask you some questions about your circumstances. That's fine, but be sensitive to the fact that you can't always assume what the question is that they've got unless you ask them. Some people will be very clear, they'll come in, they'll say, I want to find out about this grant, but other people might not, and they might be interested, they might not be interested in grants, they might just be interested in finding out more about cavity wall materials. What is it actually, what does it involve? So ask some questions.